The third episode of The Acolyte is here, and unsurprisingly, the response among fans is universally negative. More surprisingly, it is decidedly mixed even among critics, leaving Grace Randolph to run interference on the show's behalf. Let's dive in. One of the most disappointing episodes of Star Wars ever made, says Eric Kane of Forbes magazine, the lone voice of sanity who called out his fellow peers in the establishment critic community and referred to them as crazy for their falling head over heels in love with the first two episodes of The Acolyte. Because as episode 3 clearly demonstrates, there's nothing to fall in love with here. He writes, "This entire episode is a bad joke. We learn that May and Osa lived with their mothers in a society of witches, all of whom are female and lesbian. It appears they were conceived using the Force or something. Force-using witches are also apparently frowned upon in this galaxy. They call the Force the Thread." I'm getting dark side vibes here, though I'm also getting the sense that this show will try to be all edgy and make the Jedi out to be the bad guys, which we've seen play out about half a dozen times at this point. And this is a review I wholeheartedly agree with. The challenge with reviewing The Acolyte is that it has been made in accordance with the J.J. Abrams school of mystery box filmmaking, where ever new and new mystery boxes are introduced, but half of them are never revisited or resolved, certainly not yet. In a sense, the plot has thickened for 3 episodes straight now, except it hasn't, because we just go from one mystery box to the other, with only virtue signaling and other assorted messaging in between. Meaning the actual plot and narrative of each episode is flimsy and certainly not what I would call engaging. Maybe the series would kind of work if you saw all episodes in one go, however exhausting that may be, but one by one, each episode is a frustrating affair, and that is entirely on Leslie Headland, whom again I maintain has been set to take the fall for this failure in the making. The only real takeaway from this episode is that the power-obsessed lesbian space witches are persecuted for their beliefs, so you should sympathize with them. I guess because Lucasfilm creative director Dave Filoni's wife identifies as a witch. Yes, I kid you not, look it up. And she'll probably turn him into a newt or something if witches aren't given a massive amount of screen time and portrayed in the best light possible, with their cultish rituals and chanting and all. Meanwhile, the power-obsessed Jedi are low-key portrayed as the bad guys here, coming and bothering the poor coven of lesbian witches who did nothing wrong other than creating Force butt babies. And then they all die in a mystery box, to be opened in a later episode if Headland remembers. In other words, this is the Spock's brain of Star Wars, and there are still 5 more episodes to go. If we're honest, most critics are actually with Forbes here, because like what happened with the Rings of Power before, we have now reached the stage where more and more reviews that present as positive actually read as negative. The only exception being the ones which are centered around representation and that don't give 2 shits about anything else. That means it's deflection time, and whether it was coincidental or not, that deflection comes from Grace Randolph. She wrote on X, "I will say that I think it's going to be very hard for Disney to cast upcoming Star Wars projects, because this level of hate just isn't worth it. Even for up-and-coming actors like poor Lee Jong-jae, coming off of Squid Game, doing a great job on The Acolyte. And for what?" So yeah, pay no attention to how shit the writing and the entire premise for the show is. We should all feel bad for the poor Squid Game actor that is being allegedly bullied by the horrible fans. However, will Lucasfilm be able to attract more talent after this? Is that the excuse they'll give if Star Wars goes on a hiatus after this failure? If so, we saw it here first. The bigger issue though, which Grace was rightfully called out for in oh so many replies and oh so many quote threads, no one is hating on the actor at all. On the contrary, even the biggest haters of the show appears to like him, so where's the evidence of any hate? where are the receipts? I don't see any hate directed at anyone, least of all the cast. The only thing I see is Leslie Headland and Kathleen Kennedy being held accountable for writing and greenlighting something as subversive and all told as bad as The Acolyte, and for even including a body-positive diabetic Jedi in it. And even that is not hate towards the actor, that's calling out the writing and the entire vision. As for the Squid Game actor, all I see here is sympathy that he is doing the best he can with what he has to work with, all while being given the Rose Tico treatment by the producers. By which I mean, you know how in The Last Jedi they uglified actress Kelly Marie Tran, put her in a potato sack and everything, allegedly so she wouldn't outshine Kathleen Kennedy's self-insert Wonder Ray. Motivations may have differed, but they did something similar here, because they somehow made him look like a lesbian woman too. So no, Grace, any hate here is directed squarely at the show itself and not anyone in it. If Disney and Lucasfilm doesn't want hate directed at their shows, then the solution to that is real simple. Don't make franchise-destroying crap like this. Case in point, there was no such reaction against Andor or the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, so just do more like that. Of course, if they did, then Star Wars wouldn't be in this state in the first place. And make no mistake about it, Star Wars is in a very, very bad state right now. And that it is entirely the fault of Kathleen Kennedy, one of the worst executives in Hollywood history, as well as that of Bob Iger, who allowed her to burn Star Wars into the ground. And Indiana Jones. And Willow. What is more, where Star Wars is concerned, the brand damage will get worse for each new episode of The Acolyte that is released, as this series is a franchise killer. Even so, like my friends WDW Pro, Culture Casino and others, I expect this episode to spike in the ratings, simply because of the hype surrounding how it was going to kill Star Wars once and for all, but then utterly collapse from here on out. Because other than the unintended hilarity of lesbian space witches and mystery boxes that renders each episode unwatchable on its own, there's nothing here. And that is perhaps the biggest flaw of The Acolyte. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.